Welcome to Forum Focus here on the News Forum Network. I'm Wyatt Sharp, coming to you from Washington, D.C. as Donald Trump has been sworn in as the 47th president of the United States, not only winning the White House, Republicans, though, also winning the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives, ultimately scoring Donald Trump a trifecta that will help him to implement his domestic policy agenda. Joining me now to discuss it all, Julia Manchester. She's a national politics reporter for The Hill. Julia, thanks so much for being here.
Good to see you, Wyatt. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I want to begin by just asking you what we saw over the course of the campaign. Donald Trump committed to making kind of a number of day one promises, so to speak, as to what he would like to do if he got elected. He's been elected now. How many of those promises that he made are we expecting to actually see implemented?
So I think we have to look at two areas, the economy and immigration. These were arguably Donald Trump's two top priorities during the campaign. And we saw that they were priorities for voters as well. I mean, even though we've seen improvements in the American economy, particularly when it comes to lowering unemployment, there has been this concern among a lot of Americans that they're not feeling lowering inflation. They're still seeing higher prices than they're used to at the grocery store, higher prices at the gas pump, even though we've seen some decreasing in inflation. The Republican messaging, Trump's messaging on them, ultimately, I think was more convincing for them. It matched what they were experiencing in their own financial situations. Then, of course, you had immigration. You had this flow of migrants coming in from Mexico and Central America. And there was this perception that the Biden administration was not handling that situation well. So you saw, once again, the Trump campaign and his allies take advantage of that message on it. And voters immediately bought into it, really. So those are the two priorities I think we're going to see going into the Trump administration. Trump issuing a number of executive orders on immigration, also working with the Republican-controlled House and Senate to pass a number of legislative priorities on this. When it comes to the economy, look, we're seeing things get better in the American economy even, before Trump took office. So he, likely would take credit for that. But you're going to see an expansion of those Trump tax cuts. But there could be some intra-party fighting when it comes to passing economic reform through the House and the Senate, particularly when it comes to the debt ceiling. We know that, rising the debt ceiling, there's a group of very conservative fiscal hawks in the House of Representatives that have shown that they are willing to go up against the president on that issue. So that's one thing to look out for. But these two issues are what we should expect. And I should add that on immigration, look at some of the state capitals across the United States and see what a lot of these Republican states are doing. We're seeing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis already calling for a special session in Florida to help the Trump administration enact that agenda.
So let me ask you about that pledge that he made with regards to mass deportation. He said recently that he doesn't even really care how much it costs because of how important the issue itself is. But how does he have to kind of balance that with his pledge to restore the economy and restore kind of fiscal responsibility, if you will, in government?
Well, I think a lot of that comes down to Congress, because we know that Congress is controlling a lot of the purse strings here. And, I think it's easy for Donald Trump to say, well, I don't care how much it costs, we're going to get it done. But if the government is, putting so much money into this program, into these mass deportations, the mass deportation program, I think there could be a concern from voters or even some lawmakers how effective that money is being spent. That's why I think you're going to see him turn to, more, governors, Republican governors, to sort of help him carry that out. We don't know exactly what this is going to look like, though. I mean, there's a lot of logistical questions about this. It's easy to say I'm going to carry out mass deportations, but where are you going to look? What people are you going to deport? How does this impact programs like the Dreamers program, for example? There's a lot of questions that we don't exactly have answers to, but I expect we'll see, how this plays out going forward.
And for our Canadian audience who's wondering largely about this 25% tariff threat that he's making, he blames a lot of it on illegal immigration, on fentanyl. Canadian officials are very quick to point out that only 1% of fentanyl pouring into the United States is coming from Canada, and the other kind of portion of it is coming from Mexico. So what does that say about kind of the political messaging of it all? And is it perhaps, the reasoning for him doing this solely because of political messaging?
Donald Trump talks about how he's a deal maker, the art of the deal. He he's very good at negotiating. And I think a lot of times these threats he uses sometimes are used as leverage. Now, he's made these comments, these, sort of threats towards Canada and Mexico when it comes to these tariffs. But he's also, sort of made these other points of leverage, like buying Greenland, for example, controlling the Panama Canal. That's also another tariff issue. So, I think a lot of us are asking, not necessarily how serious he is, because he does seem serious, but is this sort of a negotiating tactic? Is this leverage? Or is he actually going to do this? Because remember, he's pledging to bring down inflation, but if he's imposing tariffs, that's going to be an issue for American consumers.
All right, we'll leave it there. Julia Manchester, thank you so much.
Thank you.
When we return, Republican Representative Rich McCormick joins us to discuss Congress's perspective. Welcome back to Forum Focus. I'm Wyatt Sharp. Before the break, you heard from Julia Manchester of The Hill about how Donald Trump is going to navigate this Republican trifecta in the House of Representatives, Senate, and now the White House. And now we'll put the question to Republican Congressman Rich McCormick himself. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us.
It's my pleasure to be with you today. Thanks.
So before the break, we were talking about kind of the border policy of the president, but then also this tariff threat that he's making. And there's a number of different promises that he's made and commitments that he's made to try and, I guess, please certain portions of the electorate, if you will. How is he rather going to kind of navigate some of these multifaceted issues that he's made so many promises on in a short amount of time?
Lots of opinions on that. I can only give you my opinion because we have a very narrow majority. It doesn't mean we all get what we want. As a matter of fact, there'll have to be compromise for us to get good conservative legislation passed through all three chambers. The problem we have right now is trying to debate some of the more controversial issues. SALT. How much taxation is going to be able to be a write-off for state taxes? That affects our budget. And we're trying not to go into deficit. So a lot of people are saying, I'm not going to do that unless we have an offset, or I'm not going to do that because I'm in a poor state and I don't want to pay somebody else's taxes, or my sons have that, take on that debt for no benefit. If you look at the Social Security or the tips tax and allowing that to go through, what about the teachers who don't make as much money as maybe somebody who receives taxes? Or what if people start the unintended consequences, which is we're going to make more of our income actually tax from tips. And so now you're going to have this offset that was unintended. What about firefighters and police officers and other people who make an equivalent type of income? Why aren't they just as hardworking? And so there's going to be a lot of debate out there, and I'm looking forward to that because that's what we have to do. But I think we'll get it done.
And he made a lot of geopolitical related promises as well with regards to the war in Israel, the war in Ukraine as well. There was what was seemingly looking like possibly a ceasefire, but then it looks like Israel is not necessarily ready to make that commitment yet. Hamas has obviously been attacking them for months and months and months now, ever since October 7th, and even going on before that as well. How can he kind of play a role as a negotiator in this type of a situation to where America doesn't have to play, a huge role, but he can still help kind of get things under control so that we don't just, as he has put it, see as, millions of people impacted and, thousands of people dying in both countries?
Yeah, so this is an age-old problem. I loved what he did with the Abraham Accords last time, getting people linked together, inconsequential fiscal ways. I think that's one way that people, once I humanize you and realize, hey, I can do business with you, we can all make money, that's great. People start to get to realize that people are just people. One of the problems we've always had in this region is there's the haves and the have-nots, just like you have in any other country. Gaza specifically has been complaining that they're not recognized as a nation, therefore they can't prosper. Well, that's not true. Look at Taiwan. Taiwan's not recognized as a nation by most of the world, and yet they prospered in great ways by microprocessors and other things that they produce that they've exported. If we can get a regime in there that actually wants to focus on making money and doing business rather than making war and getting rid of Israel, I think we'll be in good shape. How do we do that? Well, sometimes it does take war because violent people don't understand violence. Yeah. That's why I say peace through strength. I think one of the great things about President Trump is that people understand where he's coming from. You don't have to guess. And one of the problems with Biden's foreign policy is he tried to make everybody happy, which made nobody happy. And you can't pacify everybody. You can't, any parent knows that. You can't make everybody happy at once. Any husband or wife knows that. You have to make a choice, lead people to the right conclusion, and good things will happen. I think one of the great things that we do when we come from a position of strength, people understand we are still the big boy on the block. We can bring a lot of force to bear on Iran, on Russia, on North Korea, even on China, and their posturing towards Taiwan. I think once we realize that we're resolute and we're going to be in support of our allies and those people who want to seek ultimate resolution of this conflict so that, like you said, innocent people don't die, both in Gaza, also in other countries around the area, and in Israel. We want to make sure that we have relative peace. And I think Trump did a really good job with that last time. And I think he was surprisingly good with foreign policy.
And just quickly here, we don't have a lot of time, but in the last Congress, even though it was Republican held, it was a small majority, and there were a lot of kind of internal battles, if you will, with the Speaker of the House and then some other policy kind of differences. Are you confident that this Congress will be willing to work with Donald Trump in kind of an easier way to get past some of this legislation that he made a commitment to the American people that would get passed?
There is way more of a commitment than there ever was before in 2017. For Congress and the Senate to work together to get these things done, at least get the bulk of it done. Nobody's going to be perfectly happy. There's going to have to be compromise, but there was never this before. We didn't have Congress and Senate working together, say, hey, what can we actually do, and work together to get passed. Last time was kind of every man for themselves, and I think this is going to be a better teamwork effort.
All right, we'll leave it there. Republican Congressman Rich McCormick, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thanks.
All right, we will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the tariff threat by President Trump to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian imports. That's just one of the policy proposals that he talked about over the course of the election, and now people have questions about how they're going to be implemented. That's, of course, on a geopolitical level, but domestically as well, a number of promises that he's made that some of his advisors now question whether or not they're actually going to be implemented. The TikTok ban is just one example. He has previously went against TikTok in recent years, and then in the last few months, he has been a strong advocate for the app, now saying that he might delay the ban by 90 days to give TikTok more time to adjust to some of its regulations to try and make the app more accessible here in the United States. Joining me now to discuss it all is progressive media host Jesse Dollemore. Jesse, good to chat with you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite.
Let's just start it with kind of a simple and broad question as it relates to Democrats have went through this before in 2017 to 2021. It was not a smooth process. What is the next 4 years going to look like for Democrats across the country?
I hope if elected Democrats are listening to me, that they're going to put up an actual fight and be the actual opposition party to the agenda of Donald Trump. There's been too much glad-handing, too much normalizing and legitimizing of the Donald Trump agenda as it's been proposed over the months previous to the campaign, and now looking forward into an actual administration. We have people who are signaling that they wanted Joe Biden to pardon Donald Trump for the health and the security of the nation, or for whatever good that might do, not looking at the historicity of it, because it didn't. When Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon, it did not do anything but allow a future president to act just like Donald Trump did. I hope that the Democrats are in this for the fight. It's not strictly a messaging thing, but we need leaders in this moment, and how Democrats act and respond to the Donald Trump agenda is going to signal to average citizens how they should be reacting to. And I don't believe that legitimizing fascism, or fascism light, as it's been described, is the way to go.
And Republicans have a trifecta in the House, Senate, and now the White House, meaning that they don't even really have to worry about collaborating with Democrats. Obviously, they're going to have to keep in mind kind of what Democrats across the country want, but politically speaking, Democrats in Washington, they can kind of just throw their opinions out the window and focus on their own kind of domestic agenda here. What does that mean about some of, the things that might have to be reversed in the next 4 years if Donald Trump does some of the things that he's saying he's going to do? A lot of people talking too about, in the last term, he was kind of burdened by the fact that he was going to need to seek re-election, whereas this time, he is the president, and he's kind of going to be a sitting duck in many regards.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as easy on multiple fronts for Donald Trump to get his agenda through. There are slim majority in the House of Representatives, and a less slim but still pretty tight, tenuous situation in the Senate. that, coupled with the fact that the Republican Party to date is just the party of chaos. They can't even get along with themselves. We have situations, not on a federal level, but even in Georgia, where they're arresting members for trying to access the Georgia state legislature for the State of the State address. It's a party that is more about clout and trying to create virality moments on Twitter and elsewhere than it is about actual governance. So I think that is working on the part of Democrats. But going back to, I think what we're going to need to do is throw up actual opposition to delay and deny any wins that Donald Trump gets. And a lot of that is through messaging, convincing the American people of what is at stake here. And it's a dire time.
And you mentioned messaging. The 25% tariff that he's looking to impose, he says, on Canada is because of the fentanyl that's pouring into the United States. In reality, if you talk to Canadian officials, they often cite this 1% figure. Less than 1% of the fentanyl going into the United States is coming from Canada. So is it kind of a political messaging thing for him of, wanting to put America first? Of course, right now in retaliation, you're seeing the opposite coming from Canadian officials and them trying to put Canada first as much as his kind of America first messages.
Yeah, well, I don't know no one really knows what's in Donald Trump's brain at any given moment, whether it be to distract from some of the draconian immigration, mass deportation efforts that are going to be on the ground, starting on, they've started in earnest already. So I don't know if it's a distraction or if there's actual policy in mind relative to Canada. I think that he might be cutting off his own foot because the Conservative Party in your country was Trump light, certainly not as drastic as they are, but it's anybody's guess, Wyatt. Anybody's guess.
We will leave it there. Jesse Dollimore, thank you. Welcome back. Let's continue this conversation surrounding the 25% tariff threat that President Donald Trump is threatening to impose. Canadian officials really working to compose a laundry list, so to speak, of possible items that could face retaliatory action in an effort to kind of get back, so to speak, at Donald Trump. Joining me now to discuss it all, U.S. political journalist Jackson Gosnell. So, Jackson, let's just set the scene here for people as it relates to how serious the president is about the threats that he's kind of making here.
Yeah, Wyatt, it's good to be with you. I think President Trump is somebody who wants the upper hand when he negotiates with people. Obviously, he is somebody who takes charge and doesn't sit in the back of the room. And I think that's why we've seen what he's been able to do in terms of his support and other things. But more importantly, I think this is a negotiation tactic. He has been using it. He hopes it will be effective. Maybe it will be. But there's this big argument from Democrats and those on the left who believe that he's actually going to do this. I think certainly he would threaten it and to see what would happen and try and gain some leverage. I'm not so confident that it'll actually come to fruition.
And all of this is kind of in this idea of wanting to put America first, so to speak. And he's made similar threats about Canada becoming the 51st state. He wants to acquire the Panama Canal. He wants to change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, Greenland. There's a whole host of things that he's looking to do here from just the realm of possibility, because a lot of what he's saying he wants to do is very unlikely, or in some cases even impossible. How much of it is about political messaging versus things that he would actually be able to act on if it came to it?
Well, I don't know. I think that's what the American people are trying to figure out. But I will say that I don't know that so much of it is political messaging. I don't know that he has a particular point to get across. He's just won the election overwhelmingly.
Well, really saying he wants Canada to join the United States is making a political point when that's constitutionally
that's going to happen. I think that largely speaking, and this is not a partisan take, I think largely speaking, people don't believe that's going to happen. Everyone knows Canada is going to be Canada. The point he was making in doing that was, we help Canada out a lot, might as well be the 51st state. it's a joke, but because he's the president, people take everything very seriously.
Well, he's saying it's because of fentanyl, but about 1% of fentanyl pouring in to the United States is coming from Canada. Canada helps the United States as well in the way of grain, minerals, lumber, oil, all these different products, just as much in some cases as the U.S. helps us. Of course, they help us from a military standpoint. Canada does not give what they need to with respect to the GDP, but, you know, we're getting closer. We're going to have a new Canadian government soon that will take that threat more seriously. We're getting to kind of more of a level playing field here. Why is the solution not working collaboratively as opposed to this messaging of we want to just take over and manage it all ourselves? And obviously that process would cost a lot of money in its own respect.
Well, he likes to talk about the deficit, the trade deficit, but more importantly, I think Trump is somebody who is, he takes charge, as I mentioned before. He's not somebody who wants to appear soft. He wants to come in very strong. Your prime minister, who by the way just resigned, he said Canada's not for sale and that was pretty much BS. Everyone knows that. Again, I think it's this image of strength. I don't know that there's political points that have to be proven. He's won an election. He's not running for re-election again, despite what some pundits may think he's going to try to do with this end of democracy line that is often talked about. But what I will say is that President Trump is somebody who's strong. He's fierce. Like him or not, a lot of people don't like him, but like him or not, I think that he wants to project strength, and this is his way of doing it by making points that he knows people like you and I are going to have a conversation about it.
And moving forward, because obviously we're talking a lot about the geopolitics of it all, Canada is certainly a part of that, but also the war in Israel is a part of that. The war in Ukraine is a part of that as well. He made a commitment, a day one promise, so to speak, that these wars would be over. And he, at one point, had even said they would be over before he gets inaugurated, which of course did not happen. Did he break his promise on that front?
Well, we saw a deal come together just in the last few days. And
Which Israel, though, is now saying they might not move forward with.
Well, it depends on who you're getting the reporting from, but certainly there was some movement on that. And I understand that while he said it's in 24 hours, it hasn't happened that way, but it's happened quickly. There's been a lot more movement on those agreements than has happened with the Biden administration. You saw a reporter ask President Biden on his way out, who does the history books credit for this, you or Trump? He thought it was a joke, but I think it's an important thing that they've both been working together, and they credited, Biden credited Trump in that position. Now, I'm not an apologist for Donald Trump. I'm just giving you the information, but I think that certainly you see a lot of movement in that direction. Maybe it's not done in 24 hours, but I think significant progress is underway.
All right, we'll leave it there. Jackson Gosnell, thank you.
Thanks, Wyatt.